Hey guys, David here. Hope you are good. Today we have a quick tutorial / explainer. We're going to be talking about the basic components of a computer. What are they? What do you need to know about each? How do they work together? This is aimed more at beginners, but if you know a bit more about tech, perhaps it can be a useful summary and quick reference, or maybe you'll know a bunch of stuff but pick up one or two new things. So, let's go. To help make the explanations a bit easier, I've broken a computer down into 6 parts. Not a real one, I don't earn enough from YouTube to be going around breaking computers, but into 6 broad component categories. I'm also going to be using an analogy of the human body to help bring these things to life and make them a little bit easier to understand. What are the 6 in question? The first is the CPU, or Central Processing Unit. It is analogous to the human brain. Second is the motherboard, or logic board. Here the analogy is it's a bit like the skeleton or the circulatory system for a human. Brings all the information and the power between the other different parts. Numbers 3 and 4 are 2 types of memory. So for humans, if we use myself as a case study, I have type 1, repressed memories, and type 2, memories that I'm working to repress. For a computer, it's a little bit easier. They have short-term memory, which is usually referred to as RAM, which means random access memory, and long-term memory, usually referred to as storage or some reference to a hard drive. Number 5 is I/O. Sadly not a tribute to Old MacDonald, the classic E-I-E-I-O song, but in the context of a computer, meaning inputs and outputs. Effectively things that you plug into the computer to give it information, or with which it can output information. Monitors, keyboards, USB drives, etc, etc. The human body analogy for inputs and outputs, I'll leave that to your own thinking. And number 6 is the GPU, which stands for Graphics Processing Unit. Sadly not a typo of GNU, which is quite an underrated animal, but a critical component for the computer in order to do anything involving graphics, visuals, or video. And left until last because I couldn't think of a good body part analogy. Disappointing, right? So component 1, the CPU. The job of the CPU is to manage and execute all of the tasks that are given to the computer. It also coordinates all of these tasks between the other components. So it's responsible for accessing RAM or storage, short or long-term memory when it needs to. It will delegate things to the GPU that require graphics or video aspects to be completed. It will coordinate the I/O, so if you type a word, the CPU's role is to take what input the keyboard provides and give that information to the program that you're typing into. The fact that it kind of processes and executes all these tasks and coordinates everything else is why people compare it to the brain within an organism. Number 2, the motherboard. This is literally a board within the computer onto which all the other components are typically mounted or connected. It has the job of connecting with the computer's power supply and then routing that power supply into all of the other components. It also has the job of making sure that connections exist between the CPU and all of the other components. So that's why I tend to use the comparison, it's a bit like a skeleton or a circulatory system, because its main job is to provide a structure and a connection between everything. Next up we have RAM. No, not a male sheep inside the computer, although that would be an interesting design quirk. RAM is a bit like a to-do list. It is the data that the computer has, very quick and easy access to, and it can pull information from there and use it in whatever program it is running at a given point in time. For me, a good example, I like to use Logic Pro for music production, and the more RAM I have, the more synth sounds or software instruments I can have that will load instantaneously because they can be held in that short-term memory. Next up, number 4, we have storage or long-term memory. You'll often hear this or see this referred to as hard drive, which can be HDD or SSD. HDD is hard disk drive. It is the older technology where there's a physical disk inside the hard drive itself, and it is far slower at dealing with and transferring data. But they can also be cheap. So those are a good option for things that you don't need to access or work with a lot, but want to kind of have for long-term storage. SSD stands for solid state drive. Biggest distinction, no moving parts. SSDs are far faster, and if you're doing things which are intensive for transferring data, like editing 4K video, they're far quicker and better to work with, but they tend to be much more expensive, even though they're becoming more affordable. The other thing to bear in mind with storage now is there is increasingly large amounts of quick to access storage available in the cloud. Services like Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud, and others mean that you don't necessarily need a physical device for your long-term storage needs. Number 5 is I/O. I put my hands up in the air sometimes, singing I/O. No, that's another song that this isn't related to. I/O, broadly speaking, are peripherals. So the easiest ones to think about: a monitor, the computer outputs an image and the monitor displays it. A keyboard, you input keystrokes, that is taken into the computer and it will type text within the program that you're using. All sorts of extra things could be included in I/O. Maybe you have an audio interface like I have. Perhaps you've got a graphics or drawing tablet. All of these things fall into the overall peripherals and I/O bucket. The key thing with I/O is to know what kind of connections you're going to need and how you'll be able to connect those to your computer. Last but not least, number 6, the GPU. The GPU is responsible for rendering images, which basically means it is required for you to be able to see anything on your monitor, your laptop, your tablet. And it does this continuously, so that when you interact with the computer, something moves on the screen, whether it's a cursor, whether it's a character in a video game, or whatever it is you're looking at. GPUs are also involved in encoding and decoding video, which is important for things like video editing and sometimes playing certain types of video on your machine. GPUs can be included on CPU chips. That's increasingly common now, but they tend to be fairly basic and simple, able to do everything you need to for basic tasks, but they won't be great for things like gaming or video editing. The other type of GPU is discrete, which means it's a separate component, a separate video card is another term that you might hear, and are therefore great for things like gaming, video editing, 3D modeling, or anything graphically, visually intensive. So that is a whistle-stop summary of the 6 major components of a computer. There is a huge amount more detail on all these areas. To quote Morpheus from The Matrix, maybe you want to go down that rabbit hole and see how far it goes. If you have any questions for me, then please hit me up in the comments. That's all for today. So a massive thank you for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. If you know someone else who might enjoy it, please share with them. It all helps the channel and I massively appreciate it. If I ever see you in real life, I will definitely nod slightly approvingly like this. If that's not incentive, I don't know what it is. Until next time, take it easy.